Every year, a select few sleepers absolutely crush for fantasy football, and it's our job to hit on them. If you guys watched this video last year, you guys would have heard my top 5, and while not all of the players on that video ended up hitting, that video did unveil Tyrone Tracy, a guy who probably went with the final selection of your guys' drafts and ended up finishing as the RB 26 overall and 13.2 PPR points per game once he took over. The early rounds, they are still extremely crucial, but doing your research and hitting on your late round picks may just end up being the difference between squeaking into the playoffs and holding your league championship trophy. But let's kick it off in Indianapolis, where we go to my number 5 sleeper for 2025, a rookie running back I'm extremely bullish on, DJ Giddens. And the reason why DJ Giddens comes in at number 5 is really simple to me. He was a top 10 running back for me in the 2025 NFL draft, and he earned a top 75 level grade for me. So him slipping all the way to round 5 was a shock in its own right. But since then, DJ Giddens has impressed this coaching staff throughout. This quote from July 28th, as per Shane Steichen, head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, he's kind of a glider. He's got good burst, good vision. The stretch cut stuff on the outside zones has been really impressive in the last week and today, and we're really looking forward to his progress. It also mentions here they see him as a potential third down back and the type of dual threat running the football and catching out of the backfield that they want to develop behind Jonathan Taylor, also noting that he has very natural hands. And with the release of Khalil Herbert on cut day, the Colts currently only roster 3 running backs: Jonathan Taylor, DJ Giddens, and Tyler Goodson. And when we look at DJ Giddens' profile, 6 foot, 212 pound size as per the NFL Combine, 4.43 level speed, and a very intriguing receiving skill set next to a veteran running back who's averaged 2.75 targets per game throughout his career with Jonathan Taylor. And I do get this is a different regime, but we did see Nyheim Hines handle 95 plus touches and 50 plus targets in 2 straight years when Jonathan Taylor was a top 6 running back in fantasy in both 2020 and 2021. There's a lot of opportunity for DJ Giddens to establish himself as Jonathan Taylor's primary breather back, and for a veteran that we've only seen play 1 full season, the implied upside for Giddens is absolutely there should anything happen to Jonathan Taylor. I can't say enough good things about DJ Giddens at this point. Let's on to my number 4 sleeper, and that is Tory Horton, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. And the biggest reason why Tory Horton cracks this list as my number 4 sleeper for 2025 is the intriguing skill set, the intriguing archetype of wide receiver he is, and just how much his skill set complements the other 2 wide receivers in this offense. He did end up slipping to day 3 in the NFL draft, mostly due to injury issues that he had at Colorado State, but he's big, 6'3", 196 pound size at the combine. He can separate on the outside, and he has 4.41 juice on top of that. In terms of his separation metrics, as per Matt Harmon, 71st percentile separator in college versus man, and 94th percentile against press, which is the biggest weakness for the current top 2 wide receivers on Seattle. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Cooper Kupp, very, very good off-the-line wide receivers, very good in the slot, but they do struggle most against press. We should expect Tory Horton to be the main clubhouse leader at getting those X-wide receiver snaps when the Seahawks revert to 11 personnel. And the key point here is the competition for Horton wasn't between him and Cooper Kupp versus JSN. The competition for Horton to get snaps was between him and Marquez Valdes-Scantling on who would be this team's X wide receiver. You simply cannot trot out JSN, Cooper Kupp without a guy that can truly stretch vertically. And I'll tell you what, 6'3", 196 with that flowing speed that Horton does will absolutely play on this offense. We've heard reports all offseason from Brady Henderson that Tory Horton has made an impact on the coaching staff, and we see that validated on cut day. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, new addition, $4 million that the Seahawks gave him this offseason. He was one of the final cuts on the team. The main competitor for Tory Horton to get onto the field is currently no longer a Seattle Seahawk. And like I said, from a schematic standpoint, the Seahawks need Tory Horton on the field. Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith-Njigba, no defense is worried about you stretching them vertically when those 2 are on the field together. You need a Tory Horton. You need that big frame wide receiver that can work down the field. And I do think, like I said, the complementary skill set that Horton has is very intriguing in the Seattle offense, in the vision that Clint Kubiak has for it. Not to mention, if a guy like Cooper Kupp were to miss any time, a veteran wide receiver, a big-time history of injuries, I think Tory Horton can provide that similar jolt of energy in that Kubiak scheme. But what we saw from Rashid Shaheed in the Saints offense last year, Rashid Shaheed prior to his injury, 12.6 PPR points per game, nearly 7 targets per game, and 4 15-plus PPR point weeks in the 6 games he played to open up last year. As a cherry on top, as we know, rookie wide receivers, inherently more upside. And there is no doubt at some point this year, he is going to be the #1 waiver pickup on any given week. So for me, I want to stash this upside right now, especially if you're in 5-man, 6-man benches. You can add Tory Horton in your last round. Why turn down free upside? But moving off of Tory Horton, we head on to my #3 sleeper for 2025 fantasy football. And maybe I was just a year too early because I did have this guy as my #1 sleeper entering 2024, but I am going back to the well of Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. And I do think last year's thesis still applies to Benson. Highly athletic talent behind a maligned veteran who, prior to last year, had never played a season with over 15 games. I took my L last year. James Conner was the guy you needed. But the fact that we get a reroll on Trey Benson a year later at an even cheaper cost, I simply couldn't leave him off this list. The chatter last year was like, oh, James Conner's our guy. James Conner's our team captain. He is our clear lead back for the Arizona Cardinals. That's what we heard from Jonathan Gannon. That's what we heard from the coaching staff. And I do admit I should have read into that more. But how does the chatter this year compare to what we heard from last year? By all reports, it actually sounds like Benson has impressed everyone in Cardinals brass, and the vision is for him to be a huge part of this offense, even being referred to as having 2 RB1s alongside of James Conner. And we literally even heard this from James Conner himself. As you guys can see here, concepts of Trey Benson being a co-RB1 with James Conner, and we hear this quote directly from James Conner. We've got to talk about it and understand what's expected. We want to be the best rushing team in football. They've been one of the best rushing teams in each of the last 2 years. And he mentions here specifically, we need that from Benson. And the rest of the backs, we can't shy away from those conversations. We go to Trey Benson himself. He mentions going into year 2, he's a lot more confident. His confidence is through the roof, and he is ready to contribute alongside of James Conner. And while I do admit that my take of last year of Benson simply outright winning the job seems unlikely at this point, it does feel eerily similar right now to the Damian Harris versus Ramondre Stevenson debate entering Ramondre Stevenson's second year. If you guys do recall, Ramondre Stevenson, he was the offseason chatter for a team that had a stable back coming off of a strong season. If you guys remember, Damian Harris the year prior, 1,100 yards from scrimmage, 15 rushing touchdowns in 2021. And we saw Ramondre Stevenson take a big step. 14.7 PPR points per game in year 2. Rushing yards per game went up. Yards per carry went up. Overall, he was a much better back, especially in the lens of fantasy football. There's a very real possibility James Conner declines in efficiency and Benson becomes an even better back for a guy that may have lacked the reps but has the tangible traits that we want in a running back. The size, the speed, the elusiveness, the receiving ability. Trey Benson has all of those in bunches. He was a guy that I compared to Breece Hall as a prospect, and I do think the ceiling is there for him to be one of the best running backs in the NFL someday, just like Breece Hall has. And this study from Ryan Heath last year shows that year 2 is statistically the height of a running back's prime, and on average, a running back will produce nearly 40% more fantasy points in year 2 than they had in their rookie seasons. To recap, Trey Benson has a far more plausible case at a standalone role in relation to what he had last year. Despite literally being cheaper on the market, he still has that elite implied upside I talked about last year. Should Conner miss any time, older running back prior to last year had missed a ton of time in the past. There is a legit path for Trey Benson to scale as a legitimate running back 1 in fantasy. We want to litter our benches with upside, and there aren't many running backs with a higher implied upside than Trey Benson in fantasy this year, making him my number 3 overall sleeper entering 2025. But moving on to number 2 on this list, and it's funny because you can argue that Trey Benson and Bhayshul Tuten of the Jacksonville Jaguars have many stylistic similarities. It was a close call. I was stuck between who should be number 2 and who should be number 3, but I did decide to show James Conner a bit more respect versus the situation at running back that we have in Jacksonville. And this is because there's chatter in Jaguars camp right now that a trade of either Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne seems imminent, which opens up the opportunity for Bhayshul Tuten to absolutely shine. And for the rundown of how Tuten kind of stacks up as a prospect, he was a prospect that the dynasty crowd absolutely fell in love with. 99th percentile athlete, Solid receiver out of the backfield, who just posted the #1 missed tackles forced plus broken tackle rate in the class at 34.4%. And in fact, it's for a new head coach in Liam Cohn, who just oversaw an elusive 4th-round rookie running back in Bucky Irving be one of the biggest league winners in fantasy football just last year. The new regime, including Liam Cohn and new general manager James Gladstone, have an entire game plan for how they want to utilize Bhayshul Tuten, and even included it in Gladstone's pitch for the GM job. And like I've been alluding to all video, your bench in your fantasy football league, the priority should be upside. And there aren't many picks in fantasy this year with more upside than Bhayshul Tuten getting significant work in a Liam Cohn-led Jaguars offense. And while I wouldn't play Tuten in week 1, the upside is there for him to be the league winner you need. Bucky Irving, he didn't get full-time work until about week 8, and I don't want to risk missing out on my shot at this year's Bucky Irving with Bhayshul Tuten. But coming in as my #1 sleeper for 2025 fantasy football, and we go to Colston Loveland, tight end of the Chicago Bears. Yes, he qualifies, 112th overall pick in home league ADP. And I understand that people might be saying, well, Danny, you're cheating. Danny this, Danny that. Based on my view of Colston Loveland, not only is he the best sleeper in fantasy this year, 9th plus round, 10th plus round player, I downright think he's going to win leagues. He's a player I quite literally constructed my draft strategy around in the Flock League. I passed on Trey McBride in the 3rd round because I knew how aggressively I had Loveland in relation to the other site experts.
Continuing the theme of being biased, go blue, Michigan Wolverines, Colston Loveland.
Tory with the other mid-rounders, but I do have to spoil this one. Colston Loveland making it back to me at the 902. He was the sole reason I passed on Trey McBride at that 302 spot. It was in heavy consideration, but that's why you have to know your league mates. And you guys might be wondering, like, what was the reason why you didn't take Trey McBride? I think Colston Loveland is this year's Brock Bowers, and I do not say that lightly. You guys saw my ranking. I'm about 50 spots higher on Colston Loveland than anybody on the site. Colston Loveland is my tight end 5 in fantasy this year, and it's hard not to get excited when an elite tight end prospect goes in the top 10 of the NFL draft, and the first thing you heard from his top of the market head coaching hire is that he's exactly what he's looking for, and there is a match made in heaven between Ben Johnson and Colston Loveland this year. And Colston Loveland is your prototypical new age tight end. 6'6", 250 pounds, elite separation skills, and the ability to high point the football in traffic. Michigan's atrocious quarterback play in 2024 affected his production. I can speak to you guys with certainty as a Michigan Wolverines fan that the quarterback play in 2024 was some of the worst quarterback play I have ever seen from a college team. They were a bottom 5 passing unit in the league. It was not Colston Loveland's fault that he didn't have Tyler Warren's production. And in fact, if you look at the last 2 years where Colston Loveland was the best offensive player who, by the way, 2024 Michigan Wolverines, undefeated national champion. And as Jacob Gibbs points out here, he was dominant on a per target basis last year. Colston Loveland was targeted on 39.6% of his routes in 2024. That's the highest single season rate recorded by a tight end during the time the data is available between 2017 and 2024. That is higher than Brock Bowers, than Harold Fannin. We knew what he did at a small college this year, than Tyler Warren himself. Colston Loveland was the single best tight end at earning targets that we've seen in the last 8 years of NFL drafts. And don't get me wrong, Rome Odunze, he is still your prototype X wide receiver. He's probably going to lead this team in targets, but I'm starting to get very intrigued at the upside of Colston Loveland operating as that middle of the field sponge for a Ben Johnson offense. I'm calling my shot. If you don't get a top 3 tight end this year, if you don't get Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, George Kittle, or in fact, if you're in my position, you have the opportunity to select one, understand where Colston Loveland's going in your league. If you know you can get him past the 10th round, just wait on Colston Loveland, and I promise you, you will be getting 2025 Brock Bowers. I'm not saying this lightly. I believe in Ben Johnson. Colston Loveland is the elite talent that he needs. This is a warning shot. If you do not leave your drafts with Colston Loveland this year, you are playing fantasy football wrong. But either way, this marks the end of today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below and comment your favorite sleeper in drafts right now. Guys that are going past pick 100, I want to see you guys spamming it in the comment section. And of course, I mentioned the Flock League in this video. If you want access to all of our rankings, all 4 guides of the creators in the league, and a free start, sit, plus trade voucher for the season, Join the season pass now over on flockfantasy.com. You use promo code FSE, you get 30% off of the season pass. $34 will get you covered August through January. Also, if you're new to the channel, draft these players now over on Underdog. Promo code FSE. Play just $5 and get $50 in bonus funds to use on your favorite players for week 1. But with that being said, peace out. Peace out. I'll see you later in the week when I bring out my top 5 breakout candidates.